Hello, this is Chapter 3 of Eidolons, which is my debut novel coming out December 2016. I know that you know that's coming out December 2016 because in every video I say it's coming out December 2016, and I'm going to keep reminding you that it comes out December 2016, partially because I think it's funny, and also I hope you remember and you're excited and you tell your family and friends, and they're like, Harrison, great writing! And I'm like, thanks, and just all the thumbs up. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? It would. So this is day 2 of recording. I'm wearing different clothes. You don't know that, but I swear I am. I could be lying, I guess. I could be unshowered and wearing the same dirty stuff from yesterday. I'm not. Trust me. You don't have to. Whatever. Yeah. But I had so many flubs yesterday because allergies. They just harvested the cornfield across the street, which is back there. That's why I'm pointing. And so there's all sorts of dust and dryness in the air, and it's, making my nose all stuffed up and my eyes all puffy, and I'm all itchy and crying, and that last part could be from stress or not sleeping. I don't know. Also, this is the longest chapter I've read so far, and it's only like 2,500 words, like 10 to 12 pages, depending on formatting. 11 slides here, which is 2 pages, but that's just because I break it up, so it's a little easier to follow. But there's a lot to mess up, essentially. And I messed up a lot yesterday, and a lot today. Also, I had a speech impediment until I was in the 3rd grade. It still pops up, like now. But in 3rd grade, they declared me cured. I don't know that I really was, but I mean, better. It was definitely better. But it was so bad, in kindergarten, they stuck me in a special ed class because I could say about one letter, the letter P. And I had a cat, a boy cat, a tomcat, a black cat named Cupcake. And I brought him in for show and tell and introduced him as Tupcake because I couldn't say any letters, so I could say the P in Cupcake and none of the other letters. It was like Cupcake, Tupcake. And they all laughed at me. But that might have actually been because his name was Cupcake, and boy or girl, Cupcake is kind of a dumb name for anything, except for a cupcake. But yeah, that was the one time the public school system failed me, because they stuck me in the special ed class for about 2 years, from kindergarten and 1st grade, and I made zero progress with their speech therapist. And they thought I was just mentally underdeveloped. And I wasn't. I just had a lot of ear infections as a baby and infant. So the input was garbled, so the output was garbled. And I eventually went to the hospital for, just every night I would go to the hospital. It wasn't like I lived at the hospital. I would go there for a specialized speech therapist who was blonde and one of my first crushes. And we played a game about pig fucking, where you would roll the pigs, and anytime they would land doggy style, you would shout, SOOIE! So yeah, I didn't understand that as a kid. I understand it now. Little inappropriate. Yeah, but 6 months with her, and I was speaking normally. I could say all my letters, and I over-enunciate certain things. Also, that was the year we started doing standardized testing, and I tested in the 98th percentile. Like, you're a genius! I'm like, I'm good at tests, and even more thumbs ups. Thumbs up. Yeah. Anyway, let's continue with this chapter after that 4-minute vlog. So this is Chapter 3 of Eidolons, coming out December 2016. I wasn't quite awake for my first class of the day, at noon. It was because of the mutt. Last night he had scratched at the door until I walked him. Then he ran off to fall into the pond, and the brick-led perimeter was too high for him to reach. I had to rescue him. His wet flailing wasn't fun. If he ran off again, he'd probably fall into a sewage drain, so I tied my shoelace around his neck for a collar, and then knotted the other shoelace to it for the leash. It made us both uncomfortable. He tugged, wanting free, So I wrapped the end around my hand, and the more he pulled, the better the tourniquet for me. That was around 4 a.m. I got to my African and Caribbean Lit class before everyone else, so I could sit in the back corner. Class was in Skipper's Hall, the old humanities building that'd be replaced in the next decade. Most of the professors that taught there would get bulldozed too. It still had chalkboards and only seated 20 in cramped desks that wobbled and creaked. The thermostats were dials with needles pointing to lies because it was built before central HVAC. The plasma TVs always felt out of place, and most professors never used them. Once, this professor ran out of room on the board, and he didn't want to erase anything a diligent student might copy out of awe for his brilliance. So he continued chalking his notes on the LCD screen. There were still scratches. This wasn't my favorite class. Too much religion. But the professor was all right. Professor Radulesco. A geezer with a big belly. He always wore sweater vests. He didn't use email, and he said anybody who needed help could call him until 1 in the morning, and they could call later, but he probably wouldn't answer. You can try, but I'm a heavy sleeper, he'd grumble to class before an essay was due. I didn't know who actually called him because he was a prickly man in introduction-level classes, like this one. He preferred 3rd and 4th year students because they actually read for more than the names of good guys and bad guys. Sorry. He had just walked in. Where were you? He demanded. That depends on when you mean. Until a few minutes ago, I was in a dream. She was pretty. Yesterday. Where were you yesterday? Don't tell me you sent an excuse of sickness in an email. He threw his briefcase on the table, and the flaps came undone. The locks were broken. I suspected it was the briefcase his parents gave him as a graduation present, way back when students showed up in plate armor. The leather had yellow scratches all down the side, and creases like lifelines in his palm. An email is just as effective as you brats calling and coughing into the receiver and moaning about how you vomited up breakfast. I'd never do that. But I tried to get a message to you. I tried sending an email to Kaylee so she could tell you. I was too hoarse for the phone. Right when I got the message drafted, though, I vomited all over the laptop. It short-circuited before I could send it. I pounded the send key anyway, and did it about 100 times and hoped and prayed that she'd get the email. Guess she didn't. Luckily, my computer's got insurance. Vomit insurance. It's something most college kids need. Not for illness. I won't let you make up the quiz, he said. He rummaged in the briefcase for a box of chalk. He brought his own because the school had stopped buying chalk around the time they stopped using dial-up. Most buildings had dry erase boards. Don't worry, I won't pester you with that. We've got 3 classes together, so I've heard the spiel on late work. My grade can handle a hit or 2. 3 is too many. I did the math. Normally it wouldn't be, but mythical literature isn't my favorite subject. Too hokey. I pulled out my copy of Achebe's Things Fall Apart and scanned the margin notes I had made last weekend. I was a good student. Normally. For him, anyway. You ought to take it seriously. It'll last longer than anything written in your lifetime. I suppose that's one test for its merits, but it's so skint on detail, it lacks credibility. I like some real detail in fiction, and maybe some jokes, or maybe a story where the hero isn't absolutely amazing and felling 1,000 knights over the course of a year or 2. It makes me think the knights are just toddlers riding around on sheep with pot and pan armor, and Big Bad Parador bloodies them up and sends them crying to Daddy Arthur to bolster his infamy. I acted out this epic battle, jabbing with a ballpoint pen and guarding with a notepad shield. No offense to your specialty or anything. It's not something you'd understand, he grumbled to the chalkboard. He wrote the notes for today's classes about Achebe and some background on the traditional Nigerian religion with demons that replace babies. Even the shaman couldn't tell the difference. The shaman would put on an elaborate ruse, then flip a coin and guess. Heads, the baby was a demon. Tails, the baby lived. Then the shaman charged an armful of yams. I suppose I won't understand people who enjoy that fantasy. It's a world you won't ever understand. He dropped his chalk and bent over for it, but his back was too stiff. He had to spread his legs wide enough to allow tykes on trikes through, and then he bent over. He brushed his hands together, and chalk went all over his red sweater vest. He didn't care. You're probably right, but I'll ace the course anyway. Just wait. You didn't think I'd survive our first class together last year, and I ended up with one of the top grades after that Great Gatsby paper. I showed you. I'll show you again. Careful, he said, or you'll sound motivated. I yawned and pretended not to hear. I closed my notes and counted ceiling tiles the rest of class, secretly soaking up the lecture. After class ended, I packed up my blank notebook and slung my bag over one shoulder, then shuffled between the desks, kicking dust bunnies. But the geezer grabbed my backpack. It came off and I stumbled into the doorframe. Sit back down. We've got another hour together, he grumbled. He slid my backpack across the dusty floor to where I had been sitting. There's half an hour before our next class. I'll be back. Scout's honor. I made it up to Tenderfoot, and a tenderfoot doesn't break his promises. He might break his foot because it's so tender, but that won't stop me from crawling back here if I have to. Read over your notes so you can actually contribute. He pulled out a packet of Edgar Allan Poe stories. One had a guy's hair turning gray because he got so scared of a whirlpool. I could contribute all period, and no one would disagree. I've got the passages dog-eared and underlined and annotated, and basically, if I wanted to, I could teach the next class. But I'll let you. Old guys need something so they don't get bored. But for now, I'm getting lunch. I backed away during my speech so that my back foot was out the door. If you'd wake up more than 10 minutes before class, then you wouldn't be hungry. But I was already running down the steps. The geezer would have to tumble down to catch me, and we'd probably both end up in the hospital. I didn't know his problems sometimes. The town was the size of a walnut. I could make it to McDonald's at the edge of town and back in 10 minutes if I ran. I wouldn't go to McDonald's, and I wouldn't run either. There were plenty of stores between. There was Jarsma's, this genuine Dutch bakery. It said so on the sign in funny calligraphy. They made wonderful desserts like brownies and chocolate croissants and muffins with chocolate chips in them and some sacha torte. I think they had bread too. It was always crowded though. It was the middle of the day. College kids had classes, other kids had school, adults had slave labor. I didn't mind waiting in line, I just couldn't figure out why there was one. The whole town was like that. Everyone should have been off their lunch break, but the street was filthy with cars. Some sped through the lights, and others stopped for every pedestrian waiting to cross. Customers salivated over dessert display cases, then pointed at the tiniest square of fudge so they wouldn't ruin their diet. The traditional Dutch milkmaid would weigh it, bring it up, and as the customer fumbled through their pocket change, she'd wrap the fudge in a foot of wax paper. The customer paid to immediately tear it open and pop it in, then they got back in line for more. I was guilty of going for seconds too, but I'd gotten a dozen pieces the first time. The line to Jarsma's extended along the display cases, and that teased customers with moist delights, then around the rack of postcards, and to the connecting shop that had blue and white etchings on ceramic coasters and windmill models and all sorts of Dutch tchotchkes. And finally, it ended outside the shop with me, snacking on my first bag of fudge. A kid peeked through the window, but a bunch of adults on the inside were blocking his views of sweets. He took a big whiff of the air, but he could probably only smell glass and car exhaust. Gripped in his hand was a painted balloon. He stood on his toes to see over the adults, but it only raised his 4-foot frame to 4'2". so he stretched higher until he wobbled backwards. His arms flailed, and he plopped onto the sidewalk crack. He let go of his balloon. The helium carried it upward until I grabbed the string and hoisted the kid by his trousers to his feet. "Thanks," he mumbled. The balloon had a wolf painted on it. "Where'd you get the neat balloon?" "The fair," he said, twisting his neck one way then the other. "The school has one." "My school needs a fair. All the kids would show up drunk or end up drunk. You know what that's like. But it'd be fun anyway, so long as I wasn't stepping through puke to get my cotton candy." "I had some of that!" he shrieked, and he let go of his balloon. I yanked it from the air and gave it back to him. "Blue or pink?" "I'm a boy." He bit the balloon string until the helium dragged it from his widely spaced chompers. I handed him the slimy string. "Boys can eat pink. Go figure. I do it all the time." His balloon bobbed at eye level and twisted with the breeze. The wolf glared at me. "And why is there a wolf on your balloon?" "I like wolves." "Yeah, but shouldn't it be on your face? They usually paint faces, not balloons." Dad said it was too hard to wash off. Screw him. Paint belongs on your face. The greatest masterpieces of our times are done on little boys' faces and fat guys' biceps. The kid just looked at me, straining his neck to make eye contact, which he felt comfortable with now that we were buds. I squatted down so his neck wouldn't be sore in the morning. "Why are you waiting here?" "Mom's getting peanut brittle." "Peanut brittle? Seriously?" I asked. "Do you like peanut brittle?" "It sounds gross." "It is gross. But moms make mistakes sometimes. Have some fudge." He reached his gooey hands that had probably been in his mouth or nose recently into my bag and fingered all the pieces before grabbing one. I didn't let on that they'd be in the trash soon. Then I had an idea that'd help us both out. "Do you like dogs? They're sort of like wolves." "Yeah." He leaned in so our foreheads were touching. I gave him another piece of fudge. "Have another." "Well, I got this pup. A cute thing now, but he'll grow up big, I think. And I can't take care of him. I'd like to. He's real sweet. But the rules say I can't have a dog." "Why not?" He really sounded bummed by it. "I don't know. There needs to be a bloody revolution. But that's not important now. Would you like the pup? Ask your mom, not your dad. Here, give her this number and she can call me for the details. Got it? Stick it in your pockets now." I scribbled it for him. The sidewalk was so bumpy and my handwriting was so awful that I had to turn the paper over and write it again, this time carefully. He took the paper and read it as a single number since I hadn't used dashes or parentheses or anything. The little smarty said, 4,147,382. He let go of his balloon again, and I snatched it before it went into the atmosphere. I tied a loop so he could put his hand through and not worry about it floating off, but he grabbed the loop like it was the end of the stream. I figured I'd look up in a few minutes and see it headed for balloon heaven, where it got too high and the thing would pop. "Also take the fudge. I'm getting more for dinner. Running late for class, though." "But Mom won't let me." "Don't tell her. Eat it all now. Get a little sick. Get out of school for a few days. Win-win-win." "Win?" "No," he moaned as I walked off. "It'll be fine." He followed me, trying to give the fudge bag back. I swore it'd be fine, or could throw it out, or just leave it on the sidewalk for a stray. I wouldn't say why, but I didn't want it anymore after his boogers tainted the sweetness. I couldn't get him off me, though. His tiny legs worked harder than typing fingers to keep up, so I crossed the street. Kids weren't allowed in the street. It was like federal law. And he knew it. When he stepped onto the asphalt, he started running to get across quickly, before a cop saw. The balloon slipped between his fingers. He turned around, stared at it floating away. I ran for him. He didn't see the car coming. The car didn't see the speed bump of a kid. I made it just in time to shove him to the curb. The car hit. Thanks for watching.